They say Craigslist is where you can find anything. A good deal, a new roommate, even a new job. But what most people don't realize is that hidden among the ads and listings are monsters disguised as ordinary people. Deals too good to be true, strangers too eager to meet, promises that turn into nightmares. Tonight on Veil of Dread Horror Stories, we dive into the chilling depths of true Craigslist horror stories. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe and join us as we reveal the darkness lurking just behind the screen. True Craigslist Horror Story, Part 1. It all started on a quiet Saturday morning when I was scrolling through Craigslist, looking for something that could fix my apartment. I didn't know then that what I was about to stumble upon would turn my weekend into a nightmare I could never forget. The ad was simple: spacious apartment for rent, very cheap, immediate move-in, private landlord. My curiosity was piqued because rent in my city was outrageous, and the price here seemed impossibly low. I hesitated for a moment, then clicked the contact button. The reply came almost instantly. The landlord, a man named Victor, had a friendly tone in his emails. He described the apartment in glowing terms and assured me I could move in that same day if I wanted. Something about his enthusiasm felt off, but I brushed it aside. Who wouldn't be eager to rent an empty apartment? I asked for a time to see the place, and he insisted I come immediately, claiming it had been vacant for months, and he wanted to rent it out fast. I grabbed my bag and my keys, trying to convince myself I wasn't being reckless. The neighborhood was quiet, suburban, lined with identical houses and neatly trimmed lawns. The apartment building was older than I expected, with peeling paint and a faded sign at the entrance. My stomach tightened, a cold feeling settling in my chest as I pushed open the heavy front door. Victor met me at the lobby, smiling too brightly, his eyes scanning me in a way that made my skin crawl. He walked me through the apartment, pointing out the features with a strange intensity. You won't find another deal like this anywhere. Very secure, no noisy neighbors. Perfect for someone who appreciates peace. His words were precise, almost rehearsed. The apartment itself was nice enough, though it had an odd smell, a mixture of must and something I couldn't identify. It lingered in the air, and I found myself wrinkling my nose. We sat down at the kitchen table to discuss the lease. I noticed a stack of papers, neatly organized, and Victor's pen poised for me to sign. Just a small deposit and the rest next month, he said, sliding a folder toward me. Something about the folder made me pause. There were no official letterheads, no legal terms, just plain paper with scribbled numbers and my name. I felt a twinge of doubt, but the thought of securing such a cheap apartment pushed me forward. That night, after moving in, I began to notice things that were off. The first was subtle. Footsteps in the hallway, though I lived alone. I dismissed them as creaks of the old building. Then came the whispers, soft, barely audible, like someone muttering my name. I checked every room, turned on every light, but I was alone. I tried to tell myself it was my imagination, nerves from the move. Days passed, and the unease only grew. I noticed little things disappearing. A coffee mug, a notebook, a pair of socks. At first, I thought I had misplaced them, but then I started seeing him, Victor. Not in the apartment, not directly, but glimpses. A shadow slipping past the hallway, a reflection in the window of someone standing behind me, vanishing when I turned. I confronted him over the phone, my voice shaky. "Victor, I think someone's in the apartment." He laughed it off, telling me it was impossible, that the building was secure. But his laugh It wasn't reassuring. It was cold, deliberate, as if he knew something I didn't. Then the emails started. At first, friendly check-ins, asking if I needed anything. Then, subtle threats. I hope you're enjoying your new home. It would be a shame if anything happened to it. I froze the first time I read one. I couldn't tell if it was a joke, or worse, a warning. My apartment began to feel like a cage, each creak and shadow amplifying my fear. One night I woke to the sound of the front door opening. Heart pounding, I grabbed a baseball bat and crept toward the living room. The door was ajar, the lock broken. I saw footprints in the dust leading to my bedroom, and they were not mine. Panic surged through me, cold and sharp. I called the police, but by the time they arrived, Victor was gone. There was no sign of forced entry, no evidence beyond the footprints and the slightly open door. The police told me it might have been a transient, someone breaking in, but I knew better. I had met Victor in person. I had handed him my deposit. And yet, the sense of being watched never left. Each night shadows moved differently. Whispers floated through the apartment, and I felt his eyes on me even when I was alone. I moved out the next day, taking only the essentials, but I never closed that door. I left it slightly ajar, because if I shut it, I feared he would come back. Craigslist had promised a home, a bargain, a safe place. But for me, it had delivered a nightmare, one that I would carry forever, and one that began with a simple click. True Craigslist Horror Story, Part 2. It all began when I needed a roommate to help with rent. I had just moved into a small apartment, and the bills were stacking up faster than I could manage. I decided to try Craigslist, hoping to find someone responsible and quiet. The ad I posted was simple: looking for a clean, quiet roommate in a 2-bedroom apartment. Move in ASAP. Within hours, I received a reply from a man named Ethan. He claimed to be a student, polite, and willing to move in immediately. We arranged to meet the next day. When Ethan arrived, he seemed normal enough. Polite, well-dressed, and soft-spoken. He even carried a small suitcase, claiming he didn't own much yet. But there was something off about him. He avoided eye contact at times, his gaze drifting around the apartment nervously. I shrugged it off, convincing myself I was overthinking. The first week went smoothly. He kept to himself, doing his work quietly in his room. But then, small things started to happen. My personal items began to disappear. My headphones, a notebook, some clothes. At first, I thought I had misplaced them, but the pattern became undeniable. Ethan seemed to know where everything was, and he moved through the apartment as if he had been there long before I had. One night I woke up to the sound of my bedroom door creaking open. My heart pounded as I sat up in bed. Ethan's door was shut, yet I could hear footsteps. I grabbed a flashlight and carefully walked down the hall. The living room was empty. My stomach twisted with unease, but I told myself it was probably a dream. Days later, I discovered something terrifying. I'd been keeping a journal of all the strange occurrences, and when I opened it one morning, the pages had been tampered with. Words were scratched out, rewritten, sometimes even replaced with chilling phrases. I see you, you can't hide. I froze. My apartment, which had once felt safe, now seemed like a trap. I decided to confront Ethan, asking directly if he had been taking my things or reading my journal. He laughed lightly, a sound that immediately made my skin crawl. I would never do that, he said. But the smile on his face didn't reach his eyes. Something about him was not right, and I knew it. Then came the messages, anonymous emails, texts, even notes slipped under my door. They all described things only I would know: the pattern of my morning routine, the meals I cooked, the books I read. Whoever was watching me was inside my home. Panic surged through me as I realized I had no privacy, no sanctuary. One evening, I returned from work to find my bedroom door slightly ajar. Inside, my bed had been rearranged, my belongings scattered. A mirror that had been hanging on the wall was now on the floor, cracked in a spiderweb pattern. On the cracked glass, written in some kind of dark marker, were the words, "Soon you'll be mine." I called the police immediately, but there was no evidence of forced entry. Ethan claimed ignorance, acting concerned and helpful, yet every instinct I had screamed that he was the one behind it. I installed cameras discreetly, hoping to catch him in the act. What I captured made my blood run cold. Footage showed Ethan moving silently through my apartment when I wasn't home. He didn't just take things. He seemed to study me, memorizing my habits, lurking in shadows, watching from corners. I realized he had been planning this long before I even met him. Every action, every word, every innocent smile had been calculated. Terrified, I decided I had to leave immediately. I packed my essentials and left a note claiming I had to move for work. Ethan didn't protest. He smiled faintly, his eyes cold, almost victorious. That night I slept in a friend's guest room for the first time without fear. But the nightmare didn't end. Weeks later I found messages on my phone from unknown numbers. "You can't escape. I know where you are." My heart raced, panic clawing at me. Ethan had somehow tracked me, despite my precautions. Craigslist, a platform I had trusted to find someone reliable, had almost destroyed my life. Even now, months later, I live with constant paranoia. I check every corner, lock every door twice, and never open the door to strangers. Craigslist, which had once seemed like a simple way to connect, had become a source of fear, a reminder that some people are not who they claim to be, and sometimes the danger hides behind the friendliest smile. True Craigslist Horror Story Part 3. It started innocently enough. I was looking for a cheap used car on Craigslist. My old sedan had finally given up, and I needed something reliable without breaking the bank. I came across an ad that seemed perfect. 2010 sedan, excellent condition, very low mileage, call for details. The price was suspiciously low, but the seller seemed polite and genuine over the phone. We agreed to meet at a parking lot on the outskirts of the city. When I arrived, the car was exactly as described: clean, well-maintained, and ready for a test drive. The seller, a man named Greg, smiled warmly and handed me the keys. Something about him felt off, though I couldn't place it. His eyes lingered too long, and his handshake was unusually firm. I shrugged it off. The first test drive was uneventful, but when I returned home, strange things began to happen. At night, I heard my car engine start in the driveway, even though I hadn't touched it. I ran outside, only to find the car parked exactly where I left it. The keys were still in my pocket. I convinced myself I was imagining things, attributing the sounds to my sleep-deprived mind. The next day I received a text from Greg. "Hope you're enjoying your new ride. Drive safely." I hadn't given him my number. The text came from an unknown number. Panic set in. I blocked the number, thinking it was a prank. But then the notes began appearing. Small pieces of paper slipped under my door, written in the same handwriting as the ad. They detailed my daily routines, when I left for work, when I returned home, even the route I took to the grocery store. I tried to sell the car quickly, hoping to rid myself of the nightmare. But every potential buyer seemed to cancel at the last minute. I noticed my car appearing in places I hadn't parked it, sometimes a few blocks away, sometimes across town. I installed a GPS tracker, only to find it mysteriously removed the next morning. One night I woke up to the sound of footsteps in my driveway. I looked through the blinds and saw a figure crouched near my car, moving silently. Heart-pounding, I grabbed a flashlight and shined it toward the figure. It vanished instantly, leaving behind only the faint echo of a laugh. I realized I was being watched, and that my obsession with Craigslist had drawn something dangerous into my life. I contacted the police, but without proof, they dismissed it as paranoia. I even took the car to a mechanic to have it inspected, but there was nothing wrong. No tracking devices, no tampering, nothing unusual. Yet the feeling of being hunted never left me. Every time I parked the car, I felt someone's eyes on me. One evening I returned from work to find the passenger door slightly open. Inside, the seat was covered in handwritten notes, all with my name at the top. The messages ranged from mundane observations to chilling threats. "I see you. Don't try to hide." I screamed and called the police immediately, but by the time they arrived, the notes had disappeared. No fingerprints, no evidence, nothing. I tried to remove myself from Craigslist entirely, deleting all my accounts and ads. I sold the car to a stranger far away, hoping to sever any connection. But the nightmare wasn't over. Strange calls began, strange people appearing near my apartment, always fleeting, never staying long enough to identify. I realized that some deals on Craigslist aren't just transactions. They're invitations. Invitations into someone else's obsession, someone's control, someone's darkness. Even now, years later, I can't stop checking my surroundings, never leaving my car unlocked, never answering unknown numbers. Craigslist had promised a simple solution, but it delivered terror instead. And the most terrifying part? I know that somewhere out there, Greg is still watching, waiting for the next person to answer his ad. True Craigslist Horror Story, Part 4. I had always been cautious when buying things online, but when I saw an ad for a second-hand camera on Craigslist, I thought it was harmless. The ad read, "Professional DSLR camera, excellent condition, bargain price, must sell today." The pictures were perfect, and the price was surprisingly low. The seller, Martin, seemed eager to meet immediately and claimed he lived nearby. When I arrived at the address, it looked abandoned, the kind of house that had been empty for years. My instincts screamed at me to leave, but the thought of snagging a high-quality camera for a fraction of its price pushed me forward. Martin greeted me at the door, a thin, pale man with eyes that seemed too bright for his gaunt face. He handed me the camera quickly, insisting I inspect it outside. The moment I turned the camera on, I noticed something strange. The memory card already had photos on it, pictures of my neighborhood, my car, and even my apartment building. At first I thought it was a joke, but flipping through the images, my heart raced. The last photo was of my bedroom, taken from the window at night. I realized Martin had been watching me. I tried to leave calmly, but Martin blocked the doorway, smiling. "You'll enjoy the camera. You'll see everything, even things you don't want to see." My instincts screamed danger, but before I could react, he stepped back and disappeared into the shadows of the house. I ran to my car, my hands shaking, and drove home without looking back. That night, the camera began to act on its own. Photos appeared without me pressing the shutter button. Images of me sleeping, cooking, even brushing my teeth. I tried to delete them, but each time I removed a photo, 2 more appeared. It was as if the camera had a mind of its own, documenting my every move. Panic overtook me. I unplugged everything electronic in my apartment, hoping to cut off any connection. But the camera kept clicking. The shutter sound echoed through my living room, always coming from different corners. I barricaded myself in my bedroom, but no matter where I went, the camera followed, silently recording. One evening I discovered something even more terrifying. The photos had started to show another presence in my apartment, a dark figure lurking in the background, barely visible. It had no face, but its presence was unmistakable. Every time I looked away and then back at the photo, it seemed closer. My paranoia became unbearable. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't escape the feeling of being watched. I tried contacting Martin through Craigslist, but the account was deleted. I reported the incident to the police, but without physical evidence, they dismissed it. I even tried destroying the camera, smashing it, burning it, throwing it into a river. Yet photos continued to appear on other devices in my apartment. It was as if the camera was alive, connected to me in a way I could not understand. The final straw came one night when I woke up to the sound of the camera clicking in my bedroom. I turned on the lights and saw the dark figure standing at the foot of my bed. My camera, lying on the nightstand, had a new photo. A picture of me, terrified, frozen in the moment. I screamed, and when I looked again, the figure was gone, but the sense of being hunted never left. Even now, months later, I avoid Craigslist entirely. The memory of Martin and that camera haunts me constantly. I live with the fear that somewhere, somehow, it is still watching, capturing moments I don't want anyone or anything to see. Craigslist had promised a simple purchase, a good deal, but it delivered terror. And the most chilling part? I know Martin is still out there, still posting ads, waiting for the next unsuspecting victim. True Craigslist horror story. Part 5. I thought I had learned my lesson. After all the terror, with roommates, cars, and cameras, I swore off Craigslist forever. But when I needed a simple, cheap moving service to help transport furniture, I convinced myself it was safe. The ad read, "Reliable movers, reasonable rates, available immediately." The contact name was Ryan, and his messages were polite, professional, and oddly persuasive. I agreed to meet him at my apartment the next morning. When he arrived, he seemed harmless, tall, smiling, wearing a uniform and carrying basic moving equipment. I watched him carefully as he assessed the furniture and planned the work. He asked very few questions, which initially seemed professional, but his gaze lingered far too long on personal items scattered around my apartment. The first hour went smoothly. He carried boxes carefully, humming softly as he worked. But then strange things started to happen. I began noticing objects moving slightly when I wasn't looking. Picture frames tilted, small items shifted from counters. At first, I attributed it to my own distraction. But soon shadows appeared in the corners of my vision, vanishing when I turned my head. By the time he finished, I felt uneasy. I thanked him, paid in cash, and watched him leave. But later that night, I heard a faint tapping at my window. I assumed it was the wind, until I looked outside and saw a figure standing across the street, motionless, staring directly at me. My heart raced. The figure was Ryan. I tried to call him, but the number he had given was disconnected. My apartment felt suffocating, every sound amplified, every shadow alive. Over the next few days, notes began appearing under my door, messages scribbled in handwriting I did not recognize. "Thanks for letting me in. We'll see each other soon." My paranoia skyrocketed. I could no longer sleep without checking every corner of my apartment. Then came the calls. Low, distorted voices, sometimes whispering my name, sometimes repeating the words I had spoken aloud moments before. It was as if he had entered my mind. I changed my number, but the calls continued, coming from untraceable sources. Every time I stepped outside, I felt eyes on me, felt the presence of someone following, someone who knew my every move. Weeks passed, and I noticed small items disappearing again, not stolen in the traditional sense, but moved or altered, as if marking territory. My apartment became a maze of fear. I avoided certain rooms, covered mirrors, and left lights on constantly. I knew he was still here. One night I woke up to the sound of footsteps pacing across my apartment. I grabbed a flashlight and followed the noise. In the living room I found my furniture rearranged into a grotesque formation, pointing toward the doorway. At the center lay a small note. "You can't escape me. Craigslist brings what it promises." My blood ran cold. I decided to leave the apartment permanently. I packed all my belongings and moved to another city, cutting all connections. For a while I felt safe, convinced the nightmare had ended. But weeks later I received a box at my new address. Inside was one of my own moving boxes, filled with personal items I thought I had securely packed, along with a note, "I'm closer than you think." It became clear that Craigslist was not just a platform for listings, it was a gateway. Ryan, or whoever he truly was, had found a way into my life, into my home, and into my mind. I realized that some people, some predators, use these innocent-seeming ads to study, manipulate, and terrorize. And no matter how far I moved, I could never escape the shadow of Craigslist, never escape the horrors it can bring. Even now I check over my shoulder constantly, avoid online postings, and live with the constant fear that at any moment, someone hiding behind a friendly ad, might appear at my door. Craigslist, once a convenient resource, had become the source of a nightmare that would haunt me forever.